Hello and welcome to Crawlers. What are they? Today's video proves that even though my life may somewhat revolve around cryptids and the paranormal, there are still topics out there that are new to me. While looking for creatures that would be part of my highly requested second video on cave cryptids, I ran across the real oddity. Not to mention that it also falls into the category of being lesser known, since not a lot of information can be found about them. With that said, I was planning on adding this to our Cryptid Spotlight series, but, as stated, there aren't a lot of detailed sightings. So I figured we'd take a look at what they claim to be, go over the sightings that there are, and delve into the ties that this creature may have with other beings. Please stay to the end, since I have some important information to share with you. Starting off, your very first question may be, what exactly is a crawler? Well, in looking up information, this being seems to be tied in with skinwalkers quite a bit. However, that is not the truth, since skinwalkers and crawlers are two very different things. I think this confusion comes from the fact that some people tend to call these creatures skin crawlers. What these things are is a little bit hard to pinpoint. A part of me wants to call them a cryptid, but it is highly possible that they are of alien origin. Or there is evidence to support the idea that they are simply a spirit. This will become clearer shortly. The crawler is described as being anywhere between 5 and 9 feet tall. They have long, lanky arms and legs, and they move around by walking on all fours. For the most part, their skin is hairless, but the flesh color can be pale, light brown, or even pink. From most accounts, they appear fairly frail and sickly looking. However, they are said to be extremely good runners and can move really fast. Their hands and feet have long claws, and the head is bald with large black eyes and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. As a note, the eyes can appear yellow, but I am curious if this isn't a glowing effect that has something to do with their habit of being nocturnal. This sort of links with their known, or should I say, claimed habitat. It is believed that the crawler makes its home in caves and abandoned mines. They are said to make screeching noises or even predator-like clicks, but that last sound is said to be reserved for when they are hunting something. Let me step in and say what everyone is probably thinking. A little spot on. Others have claimed that they are capable of making a wailing sound or even able to almost mimic a human voice. For the most part, these creatures are described fairly the same way, with very minor differences. Although the biggest variant is how these beings behave. There are plenty of people who strongly say that this being isn't a threat to humans and would rather avoid them, but within the same token, they are said to be very curious of us. So much so that many sightings and descriptions state that they have been reported just standing near trees, watching people. On the opposite side of this, we have claims that this thing is quite bloodthirsty and violent. In these versions, they will actively hunt and kill both animals and humans. I have read a handful of eyewitness encounters, and all of them describe the more curious variety. So this leads me to believe that much like their name, a lot of confusion is taking place. Due to their appearance, I am sure you have already made the assumption that this is the internet famous creature known as the Rake. While all characteristics fit, and it would be reasonable to assume that they are the same being, these two are very different. With this confusion, I think it brings along with it the habits of the Rake, which tend to be more violent. This creature really seems to have one bad case of an identity crisis. You know my history with the Rake, and that I am a firm believer that it isn't real based on the known history of its origin. I only mention the Rake again due to it being so similar. Normally I would rule out talking about this being if there wasn't interesting information about it. As such, there are claims that the crawler, or crawlers if you will, have been seen all over the United States as well as Europe and Australia. Not to mention that without looking into it, I seem to recall a similar being also talked about in Asia. What is truly interesting is that while it is known as a crawler, mainly in the US, similar beings are talked about in other areas. With that said, we are going to move on to the biggest part of this creature's lore, and that is actual, or should I say, alleged sightings. Starting off in the United States, this map claims to show all the locations that have sightings, although I find it mysterious that finding stories relating to each state is nigh impossible. However, I will give it the benefit of the doubt, since these stories get lost in the slew of skinwalker or rake retellings. I have seen brief reports of this creature being seen in Kentucky, but it mainly falls into a government conspiracy involving the Men in Black. With that said, there is a fascinating story that is said to have occurred near the city of Monticello in Florida. The person reporting this says that they live in a heavily wooded part of the area, and there is a patch of wild bamboo growing behind her house. Not only this, but apparently there is an old building that used to be located on the property, but it had caved in many years ago. At one point, they noticed that a large mound of dirt, along with debris from the destroyed building, appeared near where the structure was. As time went on, this mound continued to grow, and it was mentioned that the pile also included bamboo that had been snapped off. Not long after this emergence, the residents started to hear a strange screeching noise at night, accompanied by the sight of odd-looking beings moving around the mound. They were described as being slender, with pale skin, long, odd-looking arms, and their eyes glowed yellow. They were human-looking, but not humans at all. It was noted that apparently these beings had the strength to snap the bamboo in half, even though that is fairly tough for humans to do. It was then obvious that the woman's dog wouldn't go outside at night, and even became jittery while still in the house. This behavior was due to one night seeing one of the creatures emerge from under the porch of the house. With the emergence of the dirt mound, it was discovered that it consisted of many tunnels, and it was assumed that these creatures lived underground. What makes it even freakier is the idea that the beings had actually begun to set up residence under the woman's floorboards as well. Apparently, a lot of people in the surrounding area had seen these creatures, but never in the daytime. The next story comes from the Blue Mountains of Australia. A woman who frequently enjoyed hiking and camping in the area alone encountered something really odd. On one adventure, she had decided to set up her tent and rest for the night. While trying to sleep, she heard the usual noises of nature, but then that was followed by the sound of something crashing through the brush. This sound was ignored, and she finally managed to fall asleep. In the morning, nothing seemed disturbed, so she made breakfast and packed up her gear. Not long after, she was back on the trail continuing her adventure when she heard the distinct sound of a tree snapping, and it came from behind her and off the side of the trail. Turning around, she noticed an odd-looking being standing amongst the trees. It was described as being 9 feet tall, having pale gray skin, long lanky front arms, and a large head and huge black eyes. The being just stood there, watching her, and even though it didn't move, the woman couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had washed over her. At first she was too paralyzed to move, but eventually found the strength to run away as quickly as possible. Staying in Australia, our next encounter is said to have happened in Gosford City. For many nights, a man named B.J. Dunbar claimed that he heard odd noises on his property. One night he was outside around midnight when he heard an odd rustling in the trees around his house. He assumed that it was simply a stray cat or possum, but he couldn't have been more wrong. What emerged was a long humanoid being on all fours with pale gray skin, and that it moved extremely fast. Luckily for BJ, the creature didn't seem to notice him and quickly moved on to the bush on the other side of the property. Now, here's where things take an odd turn. Mr. Dunbar claimed that that night he heard strange rustling noises coming from the roof of his house. As he listened, the sound changed into an odd sound that resembled a machine. The following night he heard the sound again, and when he went into his sister's room to wake her up so she could hear it, he found that she was already awake. Here she had been hearing those noises for a while as well. With these sightings, they are fairly vague, but they do paint an interesting picture. With the last two, they add in the possibility that this being is of alien origin, due to the appearance and the sounds. Along with these reports are claims of video proof of these beings existing. The first is from a channel called Leviathan, and it apparently originates from Poland. This is an odd one, and from looking into this video, I can't find whether it is a hoax or not. His channel doesn't seem devoted to this, and his comments on the video seem genuine. But, as we all know, that doesn't mean much. I have seen claims that this has been debunked, but that information eludes me. The final video was reportedly taken by a CCTV camera in Russia. Again, this really could be anything, but I have to admit that the still image shows that it doesn't appear to be a normal animal. Oddly enough, this video seems to be frequently shown as proof of dogmen. I can certainly see that. So with all that out of the way, is there any links to this being and other creatures? Shockingly, yes. As mentioned previously, a lot of different areas have similar types of creatures, but they have different names. We will exclude the rake here, but in Australia, there are Aboriginal cave paintings dated over 30,000 years old, depicting a creature known as the Gwyngan. There is a lot of mystery behind what these figures actually depict, but they are seen as very tall and having lanky limbs. Some assume that they represent a being found in the plane of existence known as Dreamtime. Within this realm, there are some fantastic and odd-looking creatures, so something like this would fit in perfectly. As a note, I will be making a video about those beings in the future. Another theory is that they are spirits that are watching over the living. So in this version, they are seen as more of a ghost. However, the true meaning behind the drawings have yet to be discovered. I just find it interesting that these paintings exist, and Australia is said to have probably the most sightings of these crawlers. Within Iran and other cultures, the creature known as a ghoul fits in with this being very well. They match the appearance, other than they tend to walk upright. The other thing is that they tend to be linked to graveyards, and enjoy eating human flesh. Even as such, they could burrow underground, and were normally only active at night. These beings are sometimes thought to actually be a form of jinn, so there we go with another spirit being. Although, any thought of a ghoul just standing by and watching someone isn't likely. These beings are quite obviously willing to attack a person given the chance. A very interesting version comes from the Slavic areas, and it is known as the Drekavac. Descriptions of this creature are all over the board, such as looking like a strange bird to a fox, but most commonly, it looks like the crawler. It is said to be thin, have sickly looking skin, and have elongated front arms with back legs similar to that of a kangaroo. The story is that it is created when children die who were unbaptized. Whether this is true or just a fabrication from the church, the creature is said to make its home in the Zlatibor forest. Many people to this day claim to have seen it, and even more so, have heard its screams. The name Drekavac means screamer, and it fits the being very well. Some say it sounds like a mix between a child wailing and a wolf howl, yet others say it makes a truly sinister laugh when people draw near. This being acts much like a chupacabra and will kill sheep and drink their blood. So at this point my opinions on this being are fairly mixed. At first it would appear to be unlikely, but with so many creatures from around the world being described the same way, there might be more to this than I originally thought. If, in fact, this creature is real, then it leads to the real question of, what exactly is it? Some point to it being an alien, with its large eyes and limbs, but I don't recall reading a story about an extraterrestrial walking on all fours. Although, if it is a species that lives underground, then that behavior would make sense. Although, we must remember that there are many stories about other creatures that point to it being a spirit of some sort. I have to wonder if this would then tie in with an interdimensional being. I am really at a loss with this one, but I do know from here on out, I won't be so quick to rule out sightings that claim to show a creature like this. As I end this video, I am anxious to hear about what your thoughts are on this creature. While I am still of the opinion that the rake is pure fantasy, this being certainly adds some question marks to that belief. Now, as mentioned at the beginning, here are 2 bits of important information I feel you'll be interested in. I wanted to mention that I've been keeping up with your votes for states that you would like to see next in our Cryptid by State series. As such, I can officially tell you that Colorado will be the next video, and you can expect to see it on December 7th. After this, Tennessee has gained a strong lead to be next, followed by Oklahoma and then Maine. However, as you know, your votes do make a difference, especially since Colorado moved from the bottom of the list to the top with only a few votes. Pretty much every state is vying for position against a few states at each level. So literally, one vote can make the difference. So keep those votes coming. Finally, I was thinking about videos that I could talk about in the near future. As many of you know, as of late, I have been really interested in adding sequels to some of my long forgotten series. Mainly they have been forgotten by me, and not so much by you, my dear Cryptid family. Anyway, with the end of the year approaching very shortly, I realized that I wanted to do another #AskBen video. For those new to my channel, this is a series where you type #AskBen before your comment and ask me a question that you would like to know about. Topics can range from the usual paranormal, UFO/alien, or cryptid questions to things relating to me, my channel, or just about anything else. In the past, I have received a lot of questions relating to my thoughts of creatures or paranormal theories. I will then make a video about your questions and answer them to the best of my ability. So starting today, please leave me your burning questions and I will promise to make a video about them before the end of the year. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!